Good evening. This is World News. Tonight, Chinese military aircraft racing into Iran, street unrest shaking the Islamic Republic, trade threats turning personal between Washington and Paris, and America's immigration crackdown triggering protests and bloodshed at home. We begin tonight with Iran and reports that could dramatically alter the balance of power. 16 military cargo aircraft, less than 3 days. Unverified intelligence and flight tracking data suggest China may have carried out its largest rapid military airlift to Iran at a moment when United States-Iran tensions are sharply escalating. Neither Beijing nor Tehran is talking, but the timing is raising serious alarms in Washington. Here's what we know so far.
"16 military cargo aircraft, less than 3 days, all headed into Iran. Unconfirmed reports now suggest China has carried out the largest rapid military airlift to Iran in history, as U.S.-Iran tensions edge closer to open conflict. With American warships moving in and Washington openly discussing regime change, a new and dangerous question is emerging. Is Beijing quietly arming Tehran for a possible war with the United States? According to multiple unverified intelligence and flight tracking reports, around 16 Chinese military cargo planes have landed in Iran over the past 56 hours. If confirmed, this would mark China's fastest and largest military support operation ever sent to Tehran, eclipsing years of incremental aid. Neither Beijing nor Tehran has officially commented, fueling speculation about what exactly is being delivered and why now. The reports come as Iran abruptly shut down its airspace without explanation. Yet flight trackers still detected aircraft linked to China and Iran's sanctioned Mahan Air operating during the closure. That anomaly immediately raised alarms among analysts, especially given Iran's history of misidentifying aircraft and escalating during crises. Mahan Air is no ordinary airline. The U.S. sanctioned it in 2011 for supporting the IRGC Quds Force, and again in 2019 for transporting missile and nuclear-related materials. Any surge in Mahan Air activity during a regional crisis is treated as a potential red flag by Western intelligence agencies. At the same time, the United States is visibly reinforcing the region. The aircraft carrier USS Abraham Lincoln, escorted by destroyers, is moving toward the Middle East. Meanwhile, at least 12 U.S. F-15 fighter jets, backed by refueling tankers, have arrived in Jordan, sharply boosting U.S. strike capability. President Donald Trump has escalated rhetoric even further, openly calling for new leadership in Iran and targeting Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei's decades-long rule. The comments follow weeks of deadly protests inside Iran and warnings from Washington that all options remain on the table. Analysts say China has strong incentives to quietly support Iran, countering U.S. influence, protecting energy routes, and testing Washington's red lines. Unlike Russia, Beijing operates in the shadows, using logistics, dual-use equipment, and plausible deniability to shift power without open confrontation. With Iran's skies briefly sealed, sanctioned airlines active, U.S. forces converging, and China's shadow growing larger, the Middle East is entering one of its most dangerous moments in years. Whether these flights signal routine logistics or covert war preparation, one reality is clear: the path to confrontation is no longer theoretical, it's airborne.
Now, Iran's leadership has drawn a hard line. The country's police chief has issued a stark ultimatum to protesters: surrender within 72 hours or face severe punishment. All this as an internet blackout enters its 11th day and reports of mass casualties mount.
Iran's police chief has issued a stark warning as the country grapples with one of its most serious waves of unrest in decades. Brigadier General Ahmad Reza Radan, the head of Iran's national police, announced that Iranians he described as misled, those influenced by what he called enemy propaganda, or riot leaders, have 3 days to surrender themselves to authorities. Radan claimed that anyone who turns themselves in within this window will be treated with compassion under the law. But the warning came with a sharp contrast. He made it clear that protest leaders and instigators will face strict punishment, handled, in his words, strictly according to the law. According to Radan, calm has now been restored across the country. He insisted that despite calls for renewed demonstrations, no gatherings have taken place. This claim, however, stands in sharp contrast to reports from rights groups, witnesses, and international observers. The protests began in late December 2025, sparked by deepening economic hardship, including the collapse of the Iranian rial, rampant inflation, high unemployment, and falling wages. What started as economic anger quickly transformed into nationwide anti-government demonstrations. Analysts now describe these protests as the most serious challenge to the Islamic Republic since its founding in 1979. The government response was swift and brutal. An Iranian official has acknowledged at least 5,000 verified deaths, including around 500 security personnel, blaming what it calls terrorists and armed rioters. Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has admitted that several thousand people were killed, while accusing the United States and Israel of fueling the unrest. Rights organizations paint an even darker picture. Groups like HRANA estimate more than 2,600 deaths, with the true toll hidden by an internet blackout that has lasted more than 200 hours, leaving national connectivity at just 2%. Witnesses describe indiscriminate firegun, close-range shootings, heavy tear gas use, and morgues overwhelmed with bodies. By January 11th, major protests had largely been crushed, with heavy police and military presence, especially in cities like Tehran. But resistance has not completely disappeared. Low-level activity continues, particularly in places like Zahedan, where a prominent Sunni cleric publicly condemned the regime's violence during Friday sermons. As tensions rise inside Iran, attention has turned outward. The United States has begun repositioning military assets across the Middle East. The USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group is moving toward the Arabian Sea and Persian Gulf, bringing with it dozens of combat aircraft and Tomahawk missile capability. Additional U.S. Air Force assets, including fighters and surveillance planes, have appeared in Jordan and Diego Garcia. At the same time, non-essential U.S. personnel have been quietly withdrawn from key regional bases amid Iranian warnings of retaliation. Iran has made its position clear. Any U.S. strike would be met with attacks on American bases across the region. Iran's president warned that an attack on the supreme leader would trigger full-scale war. President Trump's rhetoric has added another layer of uncertainty. Earlier this month, he warned Iran he was locked and loaded and encouraged protesters to seize buildings, promising help was on the way. But days later, Trump pulled back, saying sources told him the killings had stopped and crediting his pressure for de-escalation. This sudden shift left many Iranian protesters feeling abandoned. Analysts warn that U.S. military action would carry serious risks, potentially uniting Iranians around the regime, triggering regional escalation, and threatening Gulf allies. For now, oil markets remain steady, and Washington says options remain on the table. But on the ground in Iran, fear, grief, and uncertainty continue to define daily life. As the 3-day surrender deadline ticks down, the question remains, is this the end of the unrest, or just a pause before the next eruption?
From geopolitics to personal politics, US President Donald Trump has launched a blistering attack on French President Emmanuel Macron, threatening a 200% tariff on French wine and champagne. The trigger? Well, Paris's refusal to join Washington's proposed Board of Peace. The response was blunt, public, and punitive.
Give me not join the Florida meeting?
Oh, did he say that? Well,
Yeah.
nobody wants him because he's going to be out of office very soon. So, that's all right. What I'll do is if they feel like Costo, I'll put a 200% tariff on his wines and champagnes, and he'll join. But he doesn't have to join. If he said that, you're probably giving it to me a little bit differently. But if he actually did say that, but as you know, he's going to be out of office in a few months.
Right now, a shocking transatlantic clash is unfolding. Former allies are trading threats, tariffs, and public insults, and at the center of it all is Greenland. And it's turning into one of the most explosive diplomatic battles of 2026. On January 19, Trump threatened 200% tariffs on French wines and champagnes unless Macron joined his proposed Board of Peace, a U.S.-led initiative starting with Gaza. Trump openly mocked Macron, saying nobody wants him, and claiming the French leader would soon be out of office.
He did say that, but as you know, he's going to be out of office in a few months.
But the escalation didn't stop there. On January 20th, Trump publicly shared a private text message from Macron on social media, a stunning breach of diplomatic norms. The message showed Macron questioning Trump's Greenland strategy and proposing a high-level G7 meeting. French officials confirmed the message was real, and global leaders were reportedly shocked. So, how did a frozen Arctic island spark a political firestorm between Washington and Europe? President Donald Trump has once again revived his controversial demand: the United States must acquire Greenland, not rent it, not partner over it, but own it. Trump argues Greenland is critical for U.S. national security, citing growing Russian and Chinese influence in the Arctic, strategic military positioning, and access to untapped resources.
Right now, we are going to do something on Greenland, whether they like it or not, because if we don't do it, Russia or China will take over Greenland, and we're not going to have Russia or China as a neighbor.
On January 4th, 2026, Trump declared that the U.S. needs Greenland and claimed Denmark is incapable of protecting it. He went further, warning the U.S. could proceed whether they like it or not. That statement sent shockwaves across Europe. Greenland is a semi-autonomous territory of Denmark, and Denmark is a NATO ally. Trump's remarks raised an unthinkable question. Could the U.S. pressure or even threaten its own allies? By mid-January, rhetoric turned into action. On January 17th, Trump announced sweeping tariffs on 8 European countries, including France, Germany, the UK, and Denmark. The message was blunt: oppose the U.S. on Greenland and pay the price. Tariffs would start at 10% on February 1st, escalating to 25% by June, unless Europe agrees to what Trump called a complete and total purchase of Greenland. And this is where Emmanuel Macron enters the spotlight. France's president emerged as the loudest and most defiant critic of Trump's tactics. Macron rejected what he called intimidation and urged Europe to stand united. Then Trump made it personal. What makes this clash even more striking is that it wasn't always this way. Back in 2017, Trump and Macron shared what many called a political bromance: handshakes, state visits, public praise. But ideological cracks soon appeared over NATO, climate change, Iran, and trade. By Trump's second term, those cracks turned into open rivalry. Trump's America First collided head-on with Macron's vision of European autonomy. Now, Macron is rallying Europe. He is calling emergency EU meetings, pushing retaliatory trade measures, and backing troop deployments to Greenland in support of Denmark. France, Germany, and the UK have all signaled they will not back down. Macron's message is clear: Europe will not be coerced. Critics warn Trump's tactics, tariffs, threats, and public exposure of private messages are eroding trust among allies. polls show little public support for aggressive action, and analysts say this growing divide could weaken NATO and benefit rivals like Russia and China. What began as a territorial demand has become a defining test of Western unity. Isn't just a personal rivalry anymore. It's a battle over power, alliances, and the future of the global order. And the world is watching closely.
Back to United States now. For a third straight week, Minneapolis remains on edge. Clashes between protesters and federal immigration officers has intensified as Immigration and Customs Enforcement, better known as ICE, expands its footprint across Minnesota. The Justice Department plans prosecutions, but it will not investigate the fatal shooting of Renee Good by the ICE agents. Thousands of agents, arrests, quotas, and growing public anger. This is how the Minnesota streets look like.
Minneapolis is now at the center of America's immigration battle. A stunning claim from the Department of Homeland Security has sent shockwaves nationwide. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem says more than 10,000 criminal illegal migrants have been arrested in Minneapolis, with 3,000 detentions in just 6 weeks. Noem says the operation was about restoring order, safety, and control, calling the city a hotspot for violent crime tied to illegal immigration. In a fiery post on social media, Noem declared the arrests a victory for public safety. She accused those detained of committing violent crimes, harming children, and spreading fear. DHS even released partial names of individuals arrested, but stopped short of providing full case details or charges. The announcement aligns with President Trump's renewed promise of mass deportations and aggressive enforcement inside U.S. cities. But the numbers are now under scrutiny. Immigration experts and civil rights groups say the figures may be wildly exaggerated. A senior fellow at the American Immigration Council warned the statistics could be highly inflated, urging independent verification before accepting the claims. So far, DHS has not released arrest records or court filings to back up the full count. Minneapolis has already been on edge. Recent ICE-related shootings, including the death of a Minnesota woman, sparked nationwide protests. Federal officers now blanket the city, while tensions rise between local communities and immigration authorities. Noem has labeled interference with ICE operations as domestic terrorism, escalating the rhetoric even further. According to recent analysis, the Trump administration has already deported hundreds of thousands, outpacing previous records. Minneapolis may be just the beginning. DHS confirms investigators are also probing fraud cases in the state, signaling a wider federal crackdown. As questions swirl over the numbers, one thing is clear: the immigration fight has entered a far more aggressive phase.
So, from Tehran's streets to America's heartland, from silent airlifts to open crackdowns, this is power in motion, asserted quickly, enforced aggressively, and contested loudly. That's World News Tonight. Thanks for watching.